The works of classical Latin literature are preserved in manuscript copies made hundreds of years after the texts themselves were written. Inevitably, each of those copies contains a certain number of departures from the original text. The greatest challenge facing an editor of a classical text is that of A, determining where the manuscripts do not reflect the original, and B, attempting to recover the lost original. Manuscript copies depart from the original for a variety of reasons, many of which relate to the processes of copying long and complex texts by hand. Some errors are paleographical in origin, caused by a confusion of letters or by the difficulty of deciphering an unfamiliar form of script. Others spring from the scribe's interaction with the text, such as substituting a synonym or using a more familiar instead of a less familiar word. Since almost all scribes in the Middle Ages were monks, words with religious associations could lead to subconscious alterations. In this talk, I want to focus on one specific kind of departure from the original, a phenomenon that textual critics call interpolation. Unlike most forms of scribal error, which replace one word or set of words with another, interpolation consists of adding words or phrases to the original text. Interpolations can be as small as a single word or as large as several lines of poetry. The larger the interpolation, the harder it becomes to regard it as the result of a simple scribal error. Indeed, critics have often treated interpolation as a sinister activity, akin to forgery. I don't myself find that characterization helpful, but I will admit that the motive for some interpolations is far from obvious, which makes them all the more intriguing. Many of the places where editors have alleged interpolation remain controversial, but all editors would agree that some degree of interpolation is present in all classical texts. Interpolation is easiest to spot when it appears in only one manuscript or group of manuscripts. In such cases, comparison with other manuscripts will usually make it obvious that something has been added to the original. Here's an example from Petronius's comic novel, The Satyricon. Quartilla, a sexually voracious priestess of the god Priapus, is recalling that she began having sex while still a girl, which accounts for her current level of expertise. She adds, "Hinc etiam puto proverbium natum illud, ut dicatur posse taurum tollere qui vitulum sustulerit." I also think that this is the origin of that well-known saying, "One who has carried the calf can carry the bull." The italicized words ut dicatur, a result clause, so that it is said, are found in one group of manuscripts but are missing in another. They're not needed for the sense, and modern editors treat them as an interpolation. I've also omitted them in my translation. They were probably intended to clarify the syntax of posse taurum tollere by supplying an explicit verb of saying, dicatur, to govern the infinitive posse, whereas Petronius presumably felt that proverbium in itself contained the notion of saying. Matters become trickier when an interpolation has made its way into all the surviving manuscripts or all the oldest manuscripts. For that to happen, the interpolation must have been made at a very early stage of the transmission. These are the cases I wish to consider in the rest of this talk. I propose to divide interpolations into three categories. First, additions that result from an attempt to explain something in the text, that is to say, glosses or comments that later become incorporated into the text, as in the Petronius passage we just saw. Second, additions that aim to supply something missing from the text. And third, additions that expand or elaborate some aspect of the text.